If you've ever felt the urge to disappear from social media, to stop posting, and to stop sharing your life, but you are not alone. At some point, something changes, and it doesn't happen all at once. It happens slowly, almost without you noticing it. You open your phone, and instead of feeling connection, you feel something different. A quiet discomfort begins to grow, and you start to sense that something about this space no longer feels right. You don't necessarily understand why at first, but the feeling is there, subtle but persistent. And eventually, you start asking yourself a question that changes everything. Why am I even doing this? There is a certain type of person who begins to pull away from social media over time. Not because they are afraid, and not because they are insecure, but because they are paying attention. They notice patterns that others overlook. They see how the system works. And once you start noticing those patterns, you cannot simply go back to how things were before. Awareness changes how you interact with the world, even in ways you don't fully realize at first. We live in a world where visibility is no longer optional. It is expected. People are encouraged to constantly share their lives, their thoughts, and their experiences. They are told to be active, to be present, and to be seen. And if you are not doing those things, something begins to happen. People start to notice your absence. They start to ask questions. Why are you so quiet? Why don't you post anything? Are you okay? And suddenly silence becomes something unusual, something that feels out of place. In a world that is always speaking, silence starts to feel suspicious. But not everyone who is quiet is hiding something. Not everyone who chooses not to post is struggling or insecure. In fact, many of the people who step back from social media are the ones who understand it the most clearly. They are not avoiding it because they cannot handle it, but because they recognize what it does. They see how quickly it turns into performance. They see how people begin to adjust themselves for attention. And once they see that clearly, they make a decision not to participate in the same way. Social media is not just a neutral tool. It is a system that is designed to capture and hold your attention. Every feature is built with intention. Every notification, every like, every comment, and every reaction is part of a larger mechanism that keeps you engaged. Over time, this constant stream of input begins to shape your behavior. You start checking your phone without thinking. You start reacting without reflection. And slowly your attention shifts outward instead of inward. At some point, something changes in the way you think. You begin to notice that you are no longer asking yourself what you truly want to do. Instead, you begin to ask what will get attention. You start creating content not for yourself, but for others. And without realizing it, your sense of value begins to depend on external feedback. The more reactions you receive, the better you feel. And the less you receive, the more uncertain you become. This creates a cycle that many people get stuck in without even realizing it. This is where awareness becomes important, because once you start to recognize how the system affects your mind, your behavior begins to change. You start to question why certain patterns exist. You begin to notice how easily your attention can be influenced. You start to see how quickly your focus can be pulled away from what truly matters to you. And once you see this clearly, you can no longer ignore it. Awareness creates distance, and that distance allows you to make different choices. At this point, people begin to fall into two different groups. There are those who continue participating without question, and there are those who begin to observe. The first group stays engaged, constantly posting, reacting, and interacting. Their identity becomes tied to visibility. The second group takes a step back. They begin to watch more than they share. They begin to think more than they react. And over time, they develop a deeper understanding of how the system operates. Observers tend to notice patterns that others miss. They see how trends form and how quickly people follow them. They see how opinions spread and how easily they can be influenced. They understand that not everything that appears important actually is. And because they understand this, they begin to protect something that most people overlook, which is their attention. Attention is one of the most valuable resources you have. It determines where your energy goes, what you focus on, and ultimately, how you experience your life. But most people give their attention away without thinking. They scroll endlessly, consuming content without realizing the cost. Every moment spent engaging with content is a moment of energy being used. And when this becomes constant, it can lead to mental fatigue and a loss of clarity. Some people begin to feel this drain more than others. They start to notice that constant engagement is affecting their peace of mind. They begin to feel overwhelmed by the noise, and eventually they decide to step back, not from life itself, but from unnecessary distractions. They start to become more intentional about what they consume and how they spend their energy. And in doing so, they begin to regain control over their own focus. As people share more of their lives online, something else begins to happen. Their identity starts to become external. People begin to form opinions about them based on what they see. They assign labels, make assumptions, and create expectations. And over time, those external perceptions can start to influence how a person sees themselves. This creates a subtle shift where identity is no longer fully internal. It becomes shaped by outside input. But when someone chooses to share less, they begin to reclaim that control. They are no longer defined by constant exposure. They are no longer shaped by every reaction or comment. Instead, they maintain a level of privacy that allows them to exist without constant external influence. This gives them the freedom to evolve without pressure and to grow without being constantly observed. There is a type of confidence that does not need to be displayed. It does not rely on validation, and it does not depend on attention. It is quiet but strong. It is stable but not rigid. And it often exists in people who feel no need to prove anything to others. These individuals are not trying to convince the world of their worth because they already understand it themselves. And that internal understanding creates a sense of calm that cannot be easily disrupted. There is also a paradox that comes with visibility. The less you share, the more mysterious you become. And the more mysterious you become, the more attention you naturally attract. People are drawn to what they do not fully understand. When something is too predictable, it becomes easy to ignore. But when something is unclear or controlled, it creates curiosity. And that curiosity gives you a kind of presence, even without actively trying to have one. Smart people do not avoid social media because they dislike it. They avoid it because they understand it. They recognize how it influences attention, how it shapes behavior, and how easily it can affect the way people think. And once you understand how something works, you begin to engage with it differently. You become more selective, more intentional, and more aware of how you use it. At some point, a shift begins to happen internally. You stop seeking constant validation. You stop needing external confirmation to feel secure. You begin to enjoy moments without the need to document them. You experience things fully, without the urge to share everything. And in doing so, life begins to feel more grounded and more present. You start thinking more deeply, observing more carefully, and living more internally rather than externally. Your focus shifts from performing for others to simply experiencing your own life. And that creates a different kind of fulfillment, one that is not dependent on outside feedback. So if you've ever felt out of place in a world that constantly demands visibility, if you've ever felt like posting doesn't feel right anymore, and if you've ever felt the pull to step away from it all, maybe it's not because something is wrong with you. Maybe it's because you're noticing something that others have not yet recognized. And once you see it clearly, you no longer feel the need to explain yourself to anyone. You simply begin to make different choices, quietly and with intention.